Hello everybody and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Yes, welcome back everybody. If you find yourself just sitting down and finishing a great movie but having nobody to talk to about it, well welcome, because we're in the exact same spot in our lives. I have nobody to talk to about some of these movies here. So yeah, let's engage in this parasocial relationship together here. Today we're going to be reviewing and discussing the movie Hell House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor, which came out in 2023. A trio of amateur paranormal investigators, Margot, Rebecca, and Chase, venture into a haunted manor tied to a decades-old murder, only to unearth connections to a demonic cult, clown mannequins, and a chilling fate worse than death. So as we hop into the review and discussion for Hell House Origins, the Carmichael Manor, I think I'm just going to start calling it Hell House 4 for this review. I don't feel like saying the title over and over again, but we're covering all these Hell House movies leading up to our new one called Hell House Lineage coming out very, very shortly here. Definitely looking forward to that one. And like I've said in all my reviews so far, I just kind of stumbled across the first one here when I was really sick, just binge watching a bunch of movies, and I'm like, oh my god, I really enjoyed that one. Let me venture on throughout the rest of the series, and we got a new one coming out. The stars aligned for ZakIsCinema here, so we could all talk about this together. But yeah, let's get into the review section, starting with the positives or just the things that I really enjoyed about this movie. So first, kind of like we were just talking about, I really appreciate how different this movie feels than our other three Hell House movies. And a big part of that is we're in a completely new and different setting in the Carmichael Manor. And I really do find the lore and backstory to this Carmichael Manor very, very interesting here. In this Carmichael Manor, they house the, Carmichael family. And in this manor, they had the parents of Arthur and Eleanor and their children Patrick, Margaret, and Catherine. And then as we start getting into this story, it's kind of explained in some of the documentary sections where there was a car accident that killed Margaret and badly injured Patrick, and they all, as a family, became withdrawn and haunted by this grief and this tragic accident. But then, shortly after, the rest of the family was found dead in this manor, and both Arthur and Patrick mysteriously vanished and only left behind one set of footprints leaving the manor at the crime scene. So I just think it sets up something so interesting where no matter what the movie was going to do, at least for me, I'm like, okay, I'm in it here. I want to see where this goes. And especially because it's so different than all of our other Hell House movies, I'm just so interested in seeing how and when it connects to the Abaddon Hotel and all our other movies here, since it's set up so different. And I want to see how it connects to the Abaddon Hotel. So, in jumping off that, I really do think this Carmichael Manor, this big manor, really helps elevate this franchise, and I just love how creepy and interesting of a setting we got set up with this movie. It feels similar to Hell House, but much bigger, much more unique as well. It almost felt to me like a mix of the Abaddon Hotel and the Shining Overlook Hotel, and much bigger budget than all our other Hell House movies, which definitely was just such a refreshing change of pace for me after getting done watching that third one, which was significantly much lower budget than this one. One of my favorite things in this movie is they actually take time to develop some of our characters. They're not the most interesting characters or groundbreaking for the genre of found footage, but for found footage, and I think for the Hell House series, we got some of the best characters in this fourth installment. For example, with our main character of Margot, she's this paranormal investigator, does some vlogging stuff, so already right there, you give us a good reason that why this character would be filming everything, and we learn learn that she kind of got into this because when she was younger, she was almost taken from a local carnival by a creepy dude and couldn't describe the man to the police, and then it kind of kept happening and happening, so she almost felt responsible for not helping solve that crime or that mystery that happened to her and affected a bunch of other people. So it makes sense why she's this paranormal activity person going in trying to solve or get new details on unsolved crimes. So I thought that was just a nice little touch there that adds a lot to the character. And I also like the drama and little bit of tension we get with Margot and her friend, I believe is named Rebecca, how they have some intense arguments between each other. Rebecca doesn't really want to be there, but she's a good friend of Margot, so she just kind of tags along to all of these adventures. So I like that relationship dynamic. And I also like how in this movie they give us characters for a reason. They would be filming everything, but when they're kind of having more of those personal conversations or arguments, they actually turn off the camera, which was a nice change of pace because I can kind of forgive that in found footage, but I think it adds to the drama or the seriousness of the conversation if you have the characters kind of filming part of it, but then when the conversation gets a little bit too personal, you shut it off. It to me, it just makes it feel a little bit more realistic, which is cool. I also like in this movie how it goes back to the first one with really creating a sense of eeriness and tension where you're not sure where the next scare is going to happen, what exactly is going to happen, and how it's going to play out. For example, there's tons of scenes in here where they're building up to the scare or building up that tension with just noise or kind of pointing the camera into darkness or obscurity where you can't really see everything, but your mind is kind of playing tricks on you or trying to imagine what is going to happen, which just plays a lot around with that scare factor. And they have a bunch of scenes where they kind of set something up, build up the tension, but then nothing happens, moves on to the next scene. So it continues to ramp up that tension and doesn't just diminish that tension by having something pop out or a loud bang or a loud noise or anything. And I love how in this movie there's a lot of shots and camera footage of big space in the background, big empty doors or closets and everything. So you're constantly just like looking around for something creepy or unsettling. So I like how they threw that in there. Significant upgrade over our previous two movies, at least to me. I think there's a bunch of really standout scenes that stuck with me. For example, I love that first scene when Chase is left in the manor all alone when Margot and Rebecca go to that creepy thrift store. And then Chase is just kind of filming some stuff for Margot and he hears a sound and then he's walking down the hallway and there was this locked room that was supposed to stay locked but is now opened up. Chase starts seeing someone moving, some shadows going on in this room. So then he goes and investigates that and just sees the clown mannequins in there, not moved at all. So I love the use of shadows in that scene. And then he keeps walking, I believe goes around another corner, and then Olsen just sees this hand creepily put around the corner of the wall, which was so unsettling, and then just slowly sees what we learn to know is one of the Carmichael girls. She's the demon ghost version of it, obviously in this scene, just kind of peek around and then slowly go back, and not a crazy big jump scare or anything that kind of pulls you out of the moment, just keeps ramping up that tension and plays a lot with the size and scope of this manor. So I love scenes like that. And I also love the scene of Rebecca doing this work presentation on her computer with her boss or someone, and she's opening up a file to start showing some of the properties and listings that she found, and she opens up one file of a picture of the Carmichael Manor, and then each one she's clicking through is just real-time pictures getting closer and closer. Then we finally see one of the back of her doing the interview, getting closer and closer, and then at one point she like realizes what's going on, and then all of a sudden there's this like demon girl next to her, but she can't see it but sees it in the pictures being shown to her in real time. So I just thought something like that was very creative and creepy and really just added a lot to that scene that really creeped me out. And to me, I really like the new clown masks and mannequins that they introduce in this movie. I love that we get that classic one in here too. And now I feel like anytime I think about clowns or scary clown movies, I'm going to think about this franchise and It, for example. And again, talking about how they do a good job with these characters, I also like what they do with Margot's brother named Chase. I like that he gets a little bit of a backstory, having some significant mental health issues. Talks about a story about seeing this girl in some of his visions or hallucinations in this instance, is telling him to go see Margot, his sister. And then apparently the next day she calls and asks him to go on this trip with her. So that's why he felt like he kind of needed to almost. So again, nothing groundbreaking, but I think out of all the franchise, these have some of the best characters. I think I still like the bigger group dynamic in that first one. I like that story and why that group is together. But in this one, I think all the individual characters, our three main leads here, get much better development and are significantly better characters. And speaking of Chase, I think he does get one of the creepiest scenes in this movie when he eventually goes missing and we see the footage of that night that he went missing, and he's kind of filming himself almost like losing his mind, slowly going more insane. He keeps hearing somebody knock at the door, but obviously no one's there, and he's just kind of losing his mind, filming himself, drinking too, so he's just a mess. And he eventually wakes up and then sees that iconic clown mask mannequin character in his bedroom, slowly looking at him, slowly following him down the hallway as he's like crying and begging and telling him that they're gonna leave, that this clown could just leave him alone. And we'll get into some of my issues with the scare scenes. I hate how this one just kind of cuts off at the end and doesn't lead to something scarier, but I appreciate all that build up there, and I think it's one of the best scenes in the movie. I also like the inclusion of the Carmichael Manor's home videos and tape recordings. Our characters find these Super 8 film reels and these old tapes of family videos from the Carmichaels, and I just like how creepy they are. They're, like I said, these old Super 8 films reminds me a lot of scenes from like Sinister and movies like that, and it just makes them really creepy and unsettling and gives us more depth and lore here that I find very interesting. And in this movie, they're not only expanding the lore, but expanding where they're filming. I guess I never realized that most of these movies really just take place in the Abaddon Hotel, and in this case in the manor, where they're literally just in one house all the time. But in this movie, they go outside a little bit more. There's a really cool scene in the woods. Once Chase goes missing, Margot and Rebecca are trying to get out of there. Their car doesn't work, so they're walking through the woods, and it's broad daylight, but it's such a creepy, unsettling scene where it reminds me of a lot of cool scenes from like the Blair Witch Project, for example. And as they're walking there, like I said, in broad daylight, they start to hear this shriek, unsettling scream that's echoing throughout the woods. And then as they're continuing to walk more panicky, they see some demons off to the distance where they're still in those cheesy costumes, but it looks better since they're much further away. So I thought that was so well done and causes them to run back because there's nowhere else to go, where you're still hearing that scream. And I loved how unsettling that scene is, and I think it's so impressive when horror movies can do something creepy just in broad daylight like that. And lastly, I like that we do get a bit expansion and more development to our connection between the manor and the Abaddon Hotel here, where we find out one of the Carmichaels, I believe Patrick, actually wore that iconic clown costume while he was murdering his family, and turns out he was the one that was behind it. And I just like that it kind of adds some more depth to that clown costume, where now you could look back in all those movies and realize like who the demon is that is possessing and is in that clown costume. And I don't think something like that is necessarily very necessary to add, but I do like that they added it, and I think it works very well. And I don't like that they try to overdo it or even more depth where it just took out all the scariness factor from it. I think they do it very subtly. They show you kind of the last couple seconds of him putting on the clown mask and then cut it off from there. So I think it was utilized just perfectly. But yeah, let's jump into my mixed aspects for the movie. So first, I think it's so cool and interesting how we find the connection between the Abaddon Hotel and the Carmichael Manor. However, I think it's just so convenient how Rebecca is the only person that ever noticed that this clock that was in the Abaddon Hotel, and they show shots of it back from our previous movies, is now, since that hotel burnt down, it's in this antique thrift shop store, and they're looking at this clock, and then Rebecca's one that discovers it has a secret compartment and then has just all the information our characters need to know to kind of make that connection between the Abaddon Hotel, Andrew Tully, and Carmichael and the Carmichael Manor. Like, it's just all in that clock, and I find it so convenient that it's all just placed right there, spelled out to our characters, and that Rebecca is the only one that I guess ever noticed this too, because it could have been so much creepier if they had more of that discovery edge around the Carmichael Manor and maybe found stuff that led to the connection. I think the manor's so big that they don't really discover a lot within the manor. So instead of just conveniently going to a thrift store and getting all the information that they needed, I thought they could have done something significantly more creepier in the setting that they were already at. However, like I said, I do like the connection between the Carmichael Manor and the Abaddon Hotel. I think it makes this franchise just seem bigger, this town as more of a character and creepier. Like I said, they find the information in the clock, which is so convenient, but I think the information is interesting and creepy because it explains that Patrick Carmichael once worked at the Abaddon Hotel, where he was kind of drawn to Andrew Tully's cult and what he was doing there. And then we kind of find out a little bit more about Andrew Tully, how he was a deeply religious man obsessed with bringing back his daughter from the dead. He gets connected to these carnival figures, talked about the clown mannequins here with Thomas Rawlings and Freddie Perkins, to kind of form a cult to do what he needs to do for his daughter. And then Tully's abandoned hotel kind of serves as their base there. And Patrick Carmichael was kind of drawn into their cultist rituals, and it all kind of connects there too. So I like the inclusion of it. I like how it makes the town seem just creepier and how all these people kind of knew each other to form this cult. So it is very interesting. I just wish we got that information in a much different way. But yeah, let's jump into my negatives, or the things that I just didn't really like about this movie. And I think one of my biggest issues, unfortunately, is they just don't give our characters a good enough reason to stay in this manor and not get the fuck out of there. And normally I feel like I'm so forgiving on horror movie cliches and stuff like this, as long as I'm having a good time and enjoying it. But for whatever reason, this movie, it just stood out to me so much more, where that's all I was really kind of thinking about. And I think the biggest issue with that is as soon as Chase goes missing, they don't go or call the police. Rebecca or Margot don't really call anybody. They find out that their car's not working, and they try to walk through the woods, but that's when all the screaming and demon shit come out, and then they run back. They all have working phones, working laptops. At one point, the Wi-Fi is even working in the manor. So if your car's not working, just call AAA. Like, anybody. Call AAA, call your fucking mom, call the dude who owns the manor and rented it to you. They could have called an Uber if they wanted to, right? So I just don't understand why they didn't do that. And especially after they get creeped out in the woods, like, I get them, like, it's a little bit far away in the woods, but as soon as they have to come back and their car's still not working, that's the point you just call somebody instead of just staying there. And they go upstairs and lock themselves in the room, where already there was creepy shit going on, so why'd you think you're gonna be safe in this creepy room? And especially because in the movie, Rebecca and Chase kind of make a pact behind Margot's back that if it gets too creepy or weird shit's going going on. They make a pact to kind of leave, and they kind of go back on that multiple times where Margot convinces them, but then creepy shit happens. Then they're threatening to leave. Then they don't leave. So that back and forth was kind of annoying and frustrating. But as soon as Chase disappeared, Rebecca should have been out of there. She should have been way gone, and their phones worked. Like, somebody should have been calling for help even when Margot was starting to get creeped out. So I just don't understand that at all. And they show the characters using their phone. If you wanted to get rid of that, they could have just had the characters try, like, sooner rather than later to call the police or somebody. And then you, like, hear, like, Andrew Tully on the phone or something, or Patrick Carmichael, like somebody. There was a way around that, but they don't even try to do that, which was just kind of weird. Also, it might be a nitpick, but I hate that texting scare scene. As soon as they get back to the manor, I believe right after the woods scene, after Chase had already disappeared, Margot gets a text from Chase where clearly it's not Chase, and they're kind of texting back and forth, and Chase is texting some weird stuff, and Margot is almost convinced that it is Chase and is like, well, maybe it is Chase. Like, bitch, like, clearly it's not. And I just don't find any of those texting scenes very creepy. I hate when horror movies do that. It just takes any tension out of it. You could do the same thing, but just have a phone call instead. And unfortunately, I found the ending, like the third act climax to this movie, very just disappointing and kind of frustrating. I like the epilogue almost when we get the Carmichael home video, kind of showing and confirming what really happened, that it was Patrick, that he murdered his family, left away because he was indicted into that Andrew Tully cult, so you get the connection there too. So I like that scene, and then showing him getting that clown mask and everything. I thought that was a nice note to leave off on, but I don't like the third act wrap up with Margot. And I think a lot of the scares do this, unfortunately, throughout the movie, where they have a great setup and build up, but then just lead to a demon, ghost, or whatever it is jumping at them. Character screams, the camera has this poor just glitch effect on it and is kind of fizzing out and then cuts to black. And that's exactly what happens to Margot at the end of a hallway. In the third act there, exact same thing, where I'm just like, oh, that's how our character is going to go out like this. You did this all throughout the movie and you're just going to do that to our main character here. So I don't know. I just wish they didn't keep doing that, because at one point it did kind of feel a little bit repetitive, and I thought there was more they could do. Creepier note to leave off on, at least for Margot's character. So it's just disappointing that it left off exactly like that. However, overall, I do really enjoy how this movie kind of switched up the formula while expanding on the lore and story for the Hell House franchise. The scares don't do too many things new or different, but I do appreciate the new setting and better characters, which kind of help stand it out on its own, and then also kind of expand and connect to our Hell House franchise as a whole here. So for my rating for this movie, this is a movie I'd put in that I'd look to rent or stream category. Very similar to the first one. I don't know if I'd pick up a physical copy of this at a discount, but if it was streaming somewhere or I wanted to rent it for $3 or $4, I'd be happy doing that again if I was kind of going through the franchise. But you guys have my thoughts here on our last Hell House movie up until the new one comes out. It's been a lot of fun going through these movies. I definitely appreciated this one more than our last two, thankfully. So I'm hoping this new one kind of continues on that trend, at least for me here. But let me know all your thoughts and feelings on this movie below. Let me know your feelings towards the new one. Are you looking forward to it? What are your hopes and anticipation for that new one? But yeah, I appreciate anybody watching my videos, so thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.